So we're coming in now for another meeting with Ambassador Lighthizer and his team. Since our meeting last week, Ambassador Lighthizer and I have been in close contact, and our teams have been working very hard. They were here. The Canadian team was here last week. They've been back this week and have been working very, very intensively, and I do want to thank the Canadian negotiators. There was a team of Canadian trade negotiators who worked with their American counterparts all night long and actually finished their meeting at 7 o'clock this morning. So there is some very intensive work happening, and I'm grateful to them. And I also just wanted to say thank you to all the journalists who are here. As some people may know, I used to be a journalist, and I've really been reflecting on the fact that, yes, ministers and negotiators are working really hard. So are all of you guys in very difficult conditions. It's another hot day today. And I am really mindful of the tremendous importance that the media plays as a part of our democracy. So before going in this morning, I made a little vow to myself to say thank you very much to everyone who was here. I really appreciate it. And Canadian democracy is stronger and exists because of your work. So thanks a lot. I'll be happy to answer your questions after this meeting. Merci beaucoup. So that was another constructive meeting with Ambassador Lighthizer and his team. Our officials reported back on the very hard work they've been doing over the past few days, including, as I mentioned, one overnight session for one of the teams this last night that just ended at 7 o'clock this morning. We commiserated with the negotiators who were in that meeting. They were all pretty tired, but in good spirits. We heard back from officials. We discussed some of the issues, and there's now more work for our officials to do. They have been set those tasks. They'll be doing that work, and then Ambassador Lighthizer and I will meet again later this afternoon. In the meantime, I'm going back now to the Canadian Embassy to meet with Premier Doug Ford.
Steve Scalise criticizing the Canadian negotiators, saying members of Congress are frustrated. Now you have Kevin Brady, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. How does that alter or change, whether it's your strategy or tactics or concerns that Congress might not have your back?
Look, as we've said from the beginning, I am paid in Canadian dollars. U.S. legislators are paid in American dollars. It is my job to stand up for the national interest. That's what we've done from day one, and that is what we are going to continue to do. We are working extremely hard and have been for the past 13 months. We've been engaged in a very intensive negotiation, something Ambassador Lighthizer calls a continuous negotiation, over the past 4 weeks. Our negotiators have been really, really hard at it, including an all-night session last night of one team that just ended at 7 a.m. this morning. So we are working very, very hard. I think a national talent of Canadians, I would say, it's a characteristic of our country and has been a historical necessity, is we are a country that is good at finding compromises. And that's a talent our negotiators certainly demonstrate. At the same time, our core objective today, and this has been the case from the very beginning, is to defend the national interest, and that is what we are going to continue to do.
Minister, when you arrived,
Canada's coalition
I'll listen to Katie's question and then Chrystia. Is that okay? I just heard her first.
Minister, when you arrived here, you made a point of saying that you're a former journalist and you spoke to journalists. There is a significant new piece of journalism in the United States. It's a book by Bob Woodward. You no doubt
I've heard of the guy.
Yeah, I suspect you've heard of it.
I've heard of Bob Woodward.
Well, are you reading the book, and does it provide any new insight into the team that you're dealing with at USTR, which of course is a representation of the Trump White House?
Look, I have great respect for Bob Woodward, as I think certainly does everyone who's ever been a journalist. I actually even used to work for the Washington Post when I was a stringer. And one of my dear friends at the Washington Post, David Hoffman, who I used to go on a lot of reporting trips with in Russia, told me taught me a lesson that he said Bob Woodward had taught him, which is you only get the good stuff in the interview starting at hour 5. So I've always remembered that, and I would say to all former journalist colleagues, isn't that amazing? Like, think about doing an interview where the good stuff starts at hour 5. That's just a personal reflection. I am maybe a bit embarrassed to admit, Katie, that I am not reading that book. As you might imagine, I have some fairly complex briefing books right now, which I am immersed in. I even now have developed a special filing system involving various transparent folders, which I've become quite fetishistic about. And that is my core reading. I've discovered from our trade negotiators, they're very kind of specific about how they store all their notes on each issue, and they've kind of converted me. So I carry around a lot of paper, and that's what I'm focused on.
Is Canada's coalition fraying here? I mean, we've got our Republican allies in Congress saying, you know, you guys got to make some concessions. We've got, you know, the Ontario government saying you bloody well better get a deal. I mean, do you feel like there's really some cracks in the coalition here that's putting more pressure on you?
As I said earlier today, Adrian, and indeed just now, I am going now to meet with Premier Ford. It will be my 3rd meeting with him about NAFTA. And, you know, one of the things which has been a strength of Canada in this entire negotiation has been the Team Canada approach in our country. And I would like to thank all of the premiers of the provinces and territories for being part of that. I would especially like to thank the members of our NAFTA Council for their support and their advice, which has come from across the Canadian economy, from groups representing a very broad variety of Canadians, and of course from across the Canadian political spectrum. That has been very valuable and continues to be valuable. And, you know, when it comes to Canadians, I do want to say that at a really personal level, I would like to thank all the individual Canadians who have reached out to me, and many of them to members of our negotiating team, to be supportive. People have sent flowers to my constituency office and chocolates. I've received thousands of emails, and people come up to me on the street and in airports, which is where I am often found, just saying, you know, how strongly they support Canada in this complex negotiation. And I want to say to everyone who's done that, thank you very much. It means a lot to me. I always share your messages with the negotiating team, and that gives us real strength and reminds us how important the work we're doing is for Canadians. Okay, I'll see you guys again this afternoon.
Thanks. We'll reach this week.
Okay, bonjour encore une fois. C'était encore une bonne réunion avec l'ambassadeur Lighthizer. L'atmosphère continue d'être cordiale, constructive. Il y a beaucoup de bonne volonté de les deux côtés. Maintenant, nos fonctionnaires vont continuer de travailler ce soir et nous avons décidé d'avoir encore une réunion demain. Another constructive, detailed meeting with Ambassador Lighthizer and his team. The atmosphere continues to be cordial. There is a lot of good faith and goodwill on both sides. We're working hard. Our officials now have some more work to do, and we'll continue working this evening. And then Ambassador Lighthizer and I agreed to meet again tomorrow.
Why is this taking so long? At a certain point, isn't it just like, let's either get a deal or say no deal? Is there a decision point here?
NAFTA is a very complex agreement which governs the largest trading relationship in the world. It governs $2 billion worth of trade every day. For an agreement of this scale, 13 months for a very deep modernization of the kind we're working on is absolutely normal. Trade agreements do take some time, both to negotiate and to update, because the economy is complicated and trade agreements are complicated. And we are absolutely committed to getting this right and to getting a good deal for Canada.
Is there a deadline this week?
Canada's sole objective, the only target that we are aiming for is getting a good deal for Canada. And so that's what we're focused on.
Prime Minister Trudeau said in the House of Commons today that he said the Americans want us to get rid of supply prevention. There had been some talk that the Americans were, at this point, simply demanding incremental changes. Is that what's happening right now? They're insisting that Canada get rid of the system?
So, Daniel, as you know, at the beginning of this intense round of negotiation, Ambassador Lighthizer and I agreed that we would not be negotiating in public, and that agreement has served us well. In a negotiation like this, having an atmosphere of goodwill and good faith and trust across the negotiating table is absolutely essential. Having said that, I think the initial negotiating positions of the parties are well known, and it is certainly the case, and I think the Americans have spoken publicly about this, that the starting point for the United States was indeed that Canada should abolish supply management, as the Prime Minister said today.
Did Mexico make your position more difficult at this moment by negotiating first?
So, what we said at the beginning of this intensive period is Canada's view for some time was that the core of this agreement, the engine, if you will, was rules of origin in the car sector, a fiendishly complex set of issues, and economically absolutely core to the North American economic relationship, core to NAFTA, core to those integrated supply chains. And we believed that the essential precondition to moving forward on other issues was to resolve the rules of origin. For Canada, the issue, the starting point, the U.S. starting point, which was impossible for us, was the U.S. notion of a 50% domestic content requirement. That was impossible for Canada to agree with. And so we put forward some creative proposals to try to achieve some of those objectives in different ways. A lot of time, as people following negotiations will remember, a lot of time last year in December, January, February, March was spent on those issues. We felt that by March, we had achieved a place that Canada could live with the United States. And so really, at that point, that became primarily a U.S.-Mexico issue. Over the summer, Mexico made some very deep, very difficult concessions on rules of origin. And the fact that Mexico made those concessions is good for higher wage workers, good for the high wage workers of Canada, good for the high wage workers of the United States. And that is what allowed the rest of the negotiation to move forward.
Time for one last question. Jerry Dias said that you were seeking elimination of softwood lumber tariffs in addition to steel and aluminum tariffs as part of these talks. Is that true?
I saw Jerry Dias today, and I like Jerry a lot. And I think that, as Jerry has said, it is really valuable that in this negotiation we have been sure, in addition to talking a lot with our business stakeholders, to be talking a lot with our labor union stakeholders. They're an important voice in Canada, and getting their feedback as negotiations have gone on has been really helpful. When it comes to softwood lumber, as I think everyone knows, as I think certainly people focused on the issues know, softwood lumber is on a separate track. That is a Commerce Department case. Canada believes that the tariffs imposed on Canadian softwood lumber are unfair, and we are therefore taking that complaint to both the NAFTA tribunals and the WTO. We're also hearing from a number of American stakeholders and American legislators about the impact that those tariffs are having on Americans who want to buy a house. And we are hearing those voices being raised. And certainly Canada believes that both Canada and the United States would be better off if these inappropriate tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber were to be removed.
Do you have any
Okay,
issue?
thanks a
very
lot.
much,
See you guys
everyone.
tomorrow.
Thank you.
So tomorrow what time?
I'll let you know.
Not tonight.
Richard.